And we're live.
Fred, we are live.
What is up, man? For everyone tuning into the live stream, sorry for having to switch links again. The joys of technology are that they're always a pain. But for those of you who don't know, who've been living under a rock, I'd like to welcome my good buddy Miguel from SoCal Watch Reviews. Miguel, how you doing, man?
How's it going, buddy? Hey, we made it 17 minutes late, but we are here.
Well, we're both Latin, so we'll just meet the
We gotta be
stereotype
late.
and move on.
It is what it is. It is what it is. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure, man. My pleasure. And I've been meaning to do this for a while, especially since you hit like the 2,000 milestone. Now I just hit 3,000. I was like, all right, you know what? I want to do a full throwback. I want to invite someone on who has been with the channel since like back when we were at like 300 and 200 or something like that.
Yeah, right. It's been a while, a year and a half, going on a year and a half or something like that. So it's been a while since we've known each other.
Yeah, man. But it's been good. And I see, we've already got a few people in. I see cool. Watch Once Over and Design Atelier both saying hi guys. Thanks for joining in right at the beginning, and thanks for finding the new link right away. So Miguel, we're going to talk about Microbrands today. Yeah. But before we start, for once, I'm actually going to get a wristwatch check done at the beginning.
Okay.
For once, I'm notorious for being like the worst at that. But you're the guest. What have you got on your list today, man?
Yeah, absolutely. So very fitting to today's conversation. I wanted to rock my Notice retrospect too. Notice is a company here located in Los Angeles, actually, where I'm from California. And yeah, they're definitely killing it. They're doing it big. They've been around, I think, since 2017, 2016. Yeah, man, we'll talk about Microbrands, but that's what I'm wearing today. What about you, buddy?
Today, I'm wearing the closest thing. I mean, you tell me if this counts as a microbrand. I'm wearing my Steinhardt Ocean One GMT.
I don't think they do, because, I mean, look, it's one of those things that I was trying to look up the definition, right? So what's a microbrand, what's an independent, and what's one of those big brands, of course. But I don't know if it fits in terms of volume, because then that's not necessarily true, because like an FP Journe is not producing thousands of watches a year, right? So I don't know if it's to do with money. It's an interesting question, to be honest with you. I don't know. So I don't know if Steinhardt is considered a microbrand, but they're definitely big. Like Christopher Ward is definitely not a microbrand. They started out as a microbrand and then kind of moved into mainstream, if you will, with all the watch people, and they have so many models out there, and I'm sure they sell a lot of watches. So
would you have considered Christopher Ward as a microbrand a year or two ago before they got like super big?
Yeah, but then they started producing their own movements. I don't know if you know that. They have their own movements and whatnot. So probably not a year ago, maybe.
That's definitely graduating to brand, I guess.
Yeah, man. But I mean, think about it, right? So every brand really started as a microbrand, right? Every brand, Rolex, Omega, every brand, and eventually graduated to like the corporate monsters that they are now. Whatever, it takes years, of course. There is a lot of companies out there that have millions upon millions of dollars when they start, so they can make a big push. Like MVMT, right? And I hate to bring them up in this conversation, because obviously we're watch guys and we shouldn't, but look at their trajectory, right? Within a few years, it went from this little brand from like university students to being sold to Movado, to the Movado group, and obviously they're not a small brand anymore, you know what I mean? So that's kind of the power of getting big too quick, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Everybody knows MVMT, whether you like them or hate them. Everybody knows who they are, you know? So
yeah. And so, but before we sort of get too deep into what is a microbrand and some of the ones that you've been dealing with,
sure,
what got you into microbrands in general? Like, what's the appeal? Because I know that you're a big Seiko guy. What sort of made the transition? Because I feel like there's sort of substitute segments.
It's so interesting, right? So if you listen to my very first episode on my podcast, second episode on the podcast, when I had just started, I said why microbrands are not a good investment. And I hated on the microbrands. I didn't see the point. I didn't see the appeal. I thought it was dumb. And here was my thought process. My thought process was, so you mean to tell me I'm going to spend $500, $600, whatever, sub $1,000 for this brand that nobody really knows. And in a few years, the brand is going to disappear. So that watch basically is going to become trash. Really, it's just going to be a piece of like memorabilia, and that's going to be it. And like, I'd rather spend that money on a Seiko or something that's been around with heritage. And I kept driving the point of heritage, heritage, heritage. So what happened was I started the channel and I started reviewing all these brands, right? Bulova, Seiko, all these like well-known brands. But then as I started the podcast, I started to collaborate with these microbrand owners, and I kind of peeled the curtains behind everything that's going on, right? I had conversations with these people, and I realized that like I'm being kind of dumb for not giving them an opportunity to like really explore that world, right? So once I got a microbrand watch in my hands and I was able to talk a little bit more to these guys, it made me realize that what they bring is actually great value proposition that all us, especially Seiko guys, are missing out with Seiko. And I saw the appeal, and then I started seeing the Christopher Wards of the world kind of getting bigger, and then some of their earlier models getting kind of expensive or kind of rare because people were like, oh, that's when they started, you know what I mean? Or take, for instance, Ming. I don't think it's really a microbrand, it's more an independent, but a lot of their old stuff is very coveted because it's when they started, and now their new stuff, you can't even get them, right? So that's kind of what got me interested into microbrands and really transitioning from this close-minded person to being more open-minded. And now I really enjoy microbrands. Are they my favorite? No, of course, Seiko is always going to be my favorite, and Omega and things like that for different reasons, though, you know? So, yeah.
Cool. And now everyone who's watching, if you guys have any questions, or if you guys have any experiences with microbrands, or even if you just have one in the collection, make sure you put that in the chat as well.
Yeah.
But all right, Miguel, for those of us, including myself, who are somewhat ignorant on the topic, what's good about a microbrand? Like, what's the appeal? I mean,
yeah, man. Yeah.
There's plenty of stuff to say on the negative side that you covered in that podcast so long ago. But and we'll touch on that in a minute. But more importantly, what are the good things? What's like the advantage or the appeal in microbrands?
Honesty is so a few things, right? So one of them would be acquisition cost. Another one would be exclusivity. So the cool thing about, and I'll use this as an example, the Notice, because I'm wearing it and I am an owner of Notice. This wasn't given to me. I bought it with my own money. So one of the cool things is exclusivity, right? So you become a part of this kind of like exclusive club, because you got to keep in mind, these people are not producing thousands and thousands of these. They're producing hundreds, right? And batches of hundreds, because it's expensive to produce these watches. So it's pretty cool to be a member of that exclusive club like this one, right? It's like the salmon dial. So there's not a lot of guys or girls out there with this dial variation. So it makes it kind of a piece unique, where it makes me feel like, oh, cool, this is exclusive. And the people that own this, like we hashtag each other on Instagram or what have you. And you feel like part of the family, right? And then number two, acquisition costs, right? So say you have $350 to spend on a watch. You're like, okay, I could go the Seiko route, but I know what kind of movement I'm going to get in it, right? And I'm not going to get sapphire, or I maybe get sapphire, but it's just kind of like, it's not really great stuff. The microbrand route, not with every microbrand, of course, but a majority of them, you get a lot of great value proposition for what you're acquiring. In essence, you could have a Seiko movement, right? So an NH movement, or you could have a Miyota movement in it. And that's what I like. A lot of brands nowadays, I'll give you an example, for $600, and I know it's a little bit up there, but here's a perfect example. This is a Gin Clear Diver. It says Swiss made. So I've spoken to the owner several times because I reviewed two of his watches. You get stainless steel, right? Sapphire crystal, ceramic bezel, has a Sellita SW200 in it. Great packaging, great customer support. It comes with a really cool stainless steel bracelet. It's 200 meters water resistance, crazy lume on the Super Luminova. And I mean, this one's a little bit up there, $600 because of the movement, but still, you're getting a Swiss watch for about $600, right? And the cool thing is he's already developing more watches. So this is becoming kind of like the OG. So to drive the point home and not kind of repeat myself, acquisition costs, exclusivity, and really design language, and I forgot customer service. So the cool thing about this is that you actually get to know the owners, right? Because microbrands are so small that if you reach out to the owners and for Notice, I'll give you an example. So Wes and Colin, they're the owners of Notice. When I became an owner, I reached out to him, and now we became friends, believe it or not, Wes and I, and it's cool. It's cool to have that relationship with this guy too. Second hour hands, or second hour, and this is Jane Clear, like I said, Peter, you become friends with these people, right? And it's cool to know that, like, hey, I was early on, so that way when they become really big and really famous, I can say that I know the owner, firsthand. So that's cool,
Yeah, I think that's definitely a big appeal. I think being close to the brand, and also,
Yeah.
I know from the times when I've been on your podcast as well as listening to it, you have a lot of these owners on your podcast, and they're actually right there front and center talking about their brands and their stories, and
of course
they're really approachable. And it's interesting knowing that you can get that sort of level of interaction with the owner, with the key people of a brand, because you don't really get that anywhere in the middle of the spectrum. You have to go to the opposite end. You have to go to something like a Richard Mille to get to be talking with the owner, because in most established brands, their owners are like, a century and a half, century long gone.
Of course.
And in other ones, obviously they're key people, they're part of a corporate chain. They have a million other things they need to be doing other than interacting with individual customers. I think that's definitely a cool thing. And from the ones that I've interacted with via your podcast, as well as the ones I've just listened to on your podcast, they all seem very sort of down to earth, very focused. It does make you think, is this the modern day equivalent of what some of the people who founded more established brands were like? Did they have that sort of mindset at the time, or was it something different? Now we got a question from the chat box. Which microbrand do you think is the next to go mainstream, a la Christopher Ward? So what's sort of the next big thing in microbrands to sort of crack the mainstream?
Oh man, that's a good question. I knew Brew Watches is getting pretty big. I'm not necessarily saying they're going mainstream. And here's the thing that probably a lot of people don't know. The guys from Christopher Ward, they had another business. I forget what it was, but I did hear a podcast from them. So these guys had already a lot of money, and they kind of became that. But I think, somebody that we actually had on the show, I'm not sure if you were on that episode, but Monta's definitely, Monta, man, Justin and his partner over there, they're definitely killing it. And they sell their watches now. They're on a different level. They're selling their watches for like over $2,000. But what I've heard from owners, like directly, not on the podcast, it's off the podcast, they're like, you know what? Their stuff, and they probably won't admit it themselves, but their stuff is close to like Rolex quality. And that's a big comparison, but they're like, no, everything, man, like the micro adjust, the packaging, the service, everything is just crazy. So I think Justin, they may develop in the future. I know there was talks, something, not their own movement, but I definitely think they want to play more with the movement and with different models. So maybe them. I'm sure I'm missing one, like an obvious one, but I can't think of it right off the top of my head. But I'm going to say Monta. So.
Okay, cool. And yeah, I mean, that's interesting. You briefly touched on it before, that it's not necessarily a volume thing. It's not necessarily even a specific price thing. Because we got a question in the comments below asking, would you call Konstantin Chaikin Microbrand? I'm not sure if you're familiar with them.
And it's more independent for sure. Yeah, the Joker watches and the crazy vampire watches. Yeah.
I think definitely there must be some element of volume, and maybe the relationship of volume to price. I think generally when people talk about an independent, they're implying a certain level of sort of higher horology, a bit more luxury, a little bit more handcrafting.
I believe so.
Would you agree?
I agree 100%, because that's another element to this whole microbrand thing, that a lot of these are just being assembled in China, of course, with off-the-shelf kind of movements, and maybe there is no level of craftsmanship. Like you said, they put the design together, right? So they design their own watch, they send the design over to China, they put it together, so it's a piece unique, but not in the sense like an FP Jordan or something like that they literally handcraft things, and it's considered independent because they're constructing their stuff from scratch, really, like Roger Smith and stuff like that. So it's
yeah. So Konstantin Chaikin, a bit more of an independent than a micro brand per se.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. And now, so we've talked a little bit about the good side of micro brands, but obviously I think a lot of people, I know I can speak from my own sort of perspective, at least. I kind of have a bit of an aversion to micro brands, just on thinking like, Okay, but they're not really sort of proven. What are some of the risks and things that people, will sort of perceive, and how would you say those are managed? How, in your experience interacting with microbrands and microbrand owners, like what are some of the stereotypes maybe that aren't right, and what are some of the things that you do need to look out for when considering a microbrand?
Yeah, for sure. So for the most part, a lot of these microbrands are using tried and tested movements, right? So they're all
Yeah.
going with Seiko, with Miyota, with the Salida, with an ETA. So that's a good thing, right? That like, hey, getting into this watch is going to be a good watch, at least from the movement perspective, because they're using a reliable movement. That they didn't come up with their own movement, and then just really, really reading the specs before you get into it. That way, you're not disappointed. Doing a lot of research as far as stereotypes. I mean, some microbrands out there are, and we had a guy on the show, and I don't want to name the name of his company because I don't like putting people down,
No,
but
that's all good.
he basically said that he designed his own watch, and it was unique to him, and we had him on the show, and I did a review on my YouTube channel. Well, come to find out, somebody called him out publicly, and they said, hey, you're lying, you got that watch, those hands, that dial, that whatever case design from Alibaba, right, from China. You basically slapped it on, and now you're lying, saying that you designed it yourself. Sure enough, it was true. So just kind of be aware of those kind of things, but for the most part, all these like really kind of well-known micro brands, there's not really a lot of negative things to say, and you are going to have people put you down because they're like, oh, it's a micro brand, but it's like, well, so what? It's my money and I can spend it on whatever I want. And
Yeah.
the cool thing is that it looks different from a lot of things out there. It may have some homage, portions to it, to the watch, and we recently, shameless plug here, tomorrow on my podcast, when it goes live, we had Mark from Long Island Watch, and then on Tuesday the video is going up to my YouTube channel, so that should be pretty fun. People should definitely check it out. He's an amazing guy. But the reason I bring him up is because a lot of his watches are considered homage watches, right? He's a micro brand, the Islander watches, but he takes a lot of inspiration from Seiko, from Hamilton, or what have you. And he admits it, for him, it's like, it was an easy way to kind of give the people what they wanted. And I'll give you an example. So, and this is straight from Mark. This is what he said. He said, all right, so the reason that I really started this brand, this micro brand, is because Seiko discontinued the SKX. SKX for him was the biggest selling watch out of his whole entire website. Like that was a moneymaker, right? That was the breadwinner, if you will. So Seiko decides to discontinue the watch. He goes, well, I see kind of some low-hanging fruit right here. I want to make some money, right? The guy's very open about that. So he's like, you know what? I went to China. I basically used that case design, but I gave the people what they wanted. Sapphire case, NH movement, solid bracelet with solid end links, and screws and all that for like less than $300. So I mean, you tell me, Fred, you could pick up an SKX for, back in the days, for let's say $250, but if you wanted to mod it to those specifications with the NH movement and sapphire and everything, now you're looking at a $500 watch, just about, because you need to pay somebody to do it or what have you. So this guy was bringing you this value for not a lot of money with a Seiko movement. So it's like, okay, it's a no-brainer, So,
Yeah.
but again, he's more in the homage side of things, but he does have some original designs as well, and I applaud him for that. And the way he's able to do the original designs is because the homage stuff funds the original fun projects, as he calls it. So
Yeah. And so then how does that differ, for example, from my Steinhardt, which is mostly homage based? They have a few original designs here and there. They're not huge volume, and they're not mad expensive. I think like mine's like 6 or 7. Like I'm trying to figure out how, I guess, where does the line stop, or even how does that differ? Well, I guess like from Christopher Ward, we sort of pointed out they're starting to make their own movements. That's sort of evolving into brand. Like
right, of course.
How do we sort of figure out that jump from microbrand to not?
Well, that's a good question. But to compare, let's compare the Steinhardt to like an Islander watch, right?
Yeah.
I've actually had an opportunity to handle an Islander watch and a Steinhardt, both of them actually. So Steinhardt, correct me if I'm wrong, they're using Swiss movements. So
Yes.
you're paying that premium for that Swiss movement, as opposed to like the Islander watch. He's putting the Japanese movements in there. But as far as quality build, man, like if I showed them to you, Fred, you'll be like, yeah, I'm pretty hard pressed to say that I'm gonna pay $500 or $300 more for this Steinhardt. What am I really paying for? I'm paying for the movement. Is the movement worth $300 more? I can tell you that it's not. Off the shelf NH movements, you could get them between $20 to $30, especially when you're doing big volume. Now a Salida movement and Etta movement, you could still pick them up for less than $100 in big volume. So what are you really paying for? You're paying for the name. And I believe Steinhardt has been around long enough to where they were kind of like the pioneers of doing this really like straight up just homage stuff. I might be wrong, but from what I know, that's kind of the way there was.
Definitely one of the early players.
Right. But then I think what kind of brought the market or a lot of the prices down would be companies like Pagani Design, or, you know, companies of that sort that started coming out straight out of China. They were like just straight up homages of watches for not a lot of money, right? It's incredible that you could still pick up a Pagani Design that looks like a Submariner for $80, and they give you an NH movement and sapphire and all that. Now, I can tell you that you can, it's different levels, because I have a Pagani Design and I compared it to the Islander, not even close. Finishing is not the same. Sharp edges, you could feel the bezel when it rotates. It's just not on the same level. So I understand why they pay more. But the Steinhardt thing, I don't get why it's so expensive, but the quality is really good. From whatever I experienced.
Well, you did bring up one dimension that we haven't talked about, which is how long they've been around.
Yeah.
A lot of the microbrands, I think that, or at least what people traditionally think of microbrands right now, are ones that haven't been around for that long. Christopher Ward has been around for a little while. Steinhardt has been around for a while. So maybe time and how long they've been around is another sort of element that perhaps plays into whether it gets defined as just a small brand or a microbrand. Because, I mean, at the end of the day in watches, just like you said at the top, heritage is everything. And when you're a year, 2 years, even 4 years is nothing in watch terms. So
I agree, man. But I think people should definitely keep an open mind. Now,
yeah, of course.
I'm not saying just love microbrands alone. Like like you mentioned something. You said, "Oh, I have a thing with microbrands." Yet you're wearing a Steinhardt. Steinhardt really is a microbrand, in my opinion, or maybe more like a Christopher Ward. I think they're to that level now where they make a lot of money. They've sold a ton of watches, but they started off as a microbrand not too long ago. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think people should definitely give microbrands an opportunity. And here's the mistake I made. I was looking at watches as an investment. Never do that. Unless you're getting into like a Rolex, then you're really going to make money, or some of those.
Let's not even bog down that tree. Otherwise, I'm going to start ranting.
I don't consider watches investments, to be honest with you. And I guess because all my watches are really sub $1,000, it's kind of a joke, But when I was starting, in the podcast, and that was about a year and a half ago that I said that about microbrands, like, oh, don't invest in that. It's not a good investment. It's like, that was completely wrong. Don't even talk about investments. These microbrand watches should be fun. If they speak to you and they're cool and you're like, man, I wish a big brand like Omega or Seiko or Rolex would do something like that, but they're not. And these people did. Oh, just pick it up, so let me just do that.
Yeah. Now we got another question in the chat box, again from Design Atelier. Name a few microbrands that you think YouTubers aren't talking about yet.
Ooh, that's a good one. Well, I had one on my YouTube channel. So the Alma Diver, the Albany Watch Company, Brett Williams, awesome guy. We had him on the show. I don't think he gets enough love, and what he's giving you is pretty cool. So like almost like a 62 MAS case design from Seiko, and Miyota movement with a high beat, and pretty good value proposition there. What other one? Brew watches, believe it or not. I know they've been around and they're pretty popular on Instagram, but I don't see a lot of reviews on Brew watches. Pretty cool stuff that they're doing. Man, what other one? Well, Monte, I mean, everybody kind of knows Monte. Man, I forget. I know there's some other ones that I follow, so many of them, and I know them, and I feel so bad. Notice has been covered, I don't think enough, but Notice is definitely on my radar because I like them and they're my friends, and I don't think they get enough love or respect. And their stuff is amazing, like great quality build. I should have probably had a list of Microbrand watches. The list could go on. I mean, it's so many out there, man. But those are the ones I could think of right at the top of my head.
Yeah.
I'll think of more.
All right, cool. All right, and now, how would you say? Because like bringing it back, we know, or at least I know, at least that you are a big Seiko fanboy.
Yeah.
I think that's safe to say.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So how would you say, or is there a microbrand you think that compares, or give us a range? Give us one that you would say is maybe trying to be at Seiko levels, one that meets Seiko standards, and ones that you think just offer supremely better value in terms of quality for what you pay versus Seiko. Because I think Seiko is a point of reference for a lot of people in that sub $1,000 price point. So
yeah, for sure.
Give us a bit of a lay of the land, so to speak.
So I think a lot of the brands that I already mentioned definitely are above Seiko quality. I'm not even kidding. Yeah. The one that comes to mind that's kind of not in par, but it surpasses this is the Islander watches, because basically you are getting a Seiko homage, but you're getting way better specs. The bezels align, and it's just so much for what you get with the finishing and everything. So I recently acquired I was fortunate enough to acquire the SPB 143, and I love that watch, but it's a little over $1,000, and people were kind of bashing me, right? Some people were like, why would anybody pay over $1,000 for a Seiko? It's ridiculous. It's stupid. But I was like, you know what? I love the case design. It's really kind of a reissue of the 62 MAS, which is a watch that I'm in love with as a Seiko fanboy. It's kind of the genesis for the whole dive watch craze for dive watches with Seiko. So I wanna get that watch. So I didn't know what to expect, right? I was like, man, I'm so nervous. I just spent all this money. Like, what the hell did I get myself into? I could have gotten something else. But long story short, I got it, and I was super impressed with it. Like, completely different than my SKX, better quality, better fit, better movement, of course. But comparing that to like a microbrand like my Notice, right? I took my Notice out and I was looking at these guys. I'm like, okay, so this Notice retrospect has an NH movement in it. Obviously, it's inferior to the 6R35 that's in this other one. But does that justify the $700 price point difference between those? I was like, no, I think it's all a branding thing. It's all marketing. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that answers your question, but a lot of microbrands, man. Like, I would say they surpass Seiko, at least the Seiko 5 line, not the Presage, the Prospects. I want to say a lot of microbrands are kind of in line with the Prospects or, the Presage, but definitely above the Seiko 5s for sure, for sure, or the SKXs and stuff for sure.
Okay, now looking just back to the box. So we got Design Atelier saying that he actually contacted Brew a while back, but they didn't contact him back.
Okay.
Let us know how long ago that was. Maybe Miguel can help you out or put them back on your radar or vice versa. Then we've also got Kevin S saying that he prefers microbrands that don't try and do homage watches. He prefers original designs.
Yeah, me too.
What are some of the, because you mentioned before also, one of the advantages to microbrands is that there's some that do homage watches, or they might do them as like a way to just sort of finance their fun projects. What are some microbrands and some models from them that feature original designs that you would highlight? Some that just look different or out there from whatever we see from the mainstream brands.
I mean, so there's a new brand, a guy that I actually been talking to, that he just debuted his watch, Coast Watches. I believe he's in South Africa. Man, it took him 3 years to come out with this design, and I'll send you the link, Fred. But really cool original design. That's one that I could think of. This guy too, Second Hour, with the Gin Clear and his Mandala watch. I reviewed both on my channel. Go check them out. Very different. I mean, they may play homage a little bit to things that you could think of, but reality is that is pretty different. Monte Watch is another one that that they have. Go look at them. I mean, go look at them yourself. You could, the Atlas, and I forget the other one what it's called, but yeah, man, different things. Notice too, I mean, they take a lot of inspiration from like the vintage world and also some Seiko designs, but original. Like, go check them out, like the retrospect and the duality and some other models. It's just different, and that's one of kind of what appeals to people, right? Because they're different. I don't like homage watches either, to be honest with you. I've been very vocal about that, and it's lazy for me, in my perspective, for a company to say we're going to invest all this money to make this watch, yet we're just going to copy another design, something that's been, sold, whether it be an Omega or a Rolex, and it's just lazy. So Brew Watch is another one. I mean, very unique, very different. They're kind of doing their own thing. Christopher Ward, I mean, pretty cool stuff. I really like Christopher Ward. Like, some of the designs that they have are very retro, very vintage, and it really speaks to me. You know what I mean? So those are just some. Like I said, I should have prepared. I got a bunch of microbrands that I know, that I follow, but right off the top of my head, those are the ones I could think of because I have a lot of communication with them. So
yeah, cool, perfect. And so I'm also just seeing, have you tried Helios at all? I'm seeing Kevin S in the chat box talking about them.
I personally have not, but I hear nothing but good things about them. They're a Canadian brand. I know Casey, I forget his name, the guy from Hodinkee. He's like a huge Helios fanboy, and yeah, pretty good stuff, man. They've been going on in a few years now, and they're getting a really good reputation. And again, like I'm telling you, Fred, 20 years from now, when people look back and say, "Oh crap, back in the days you could get a Monta for $2,000. Now they're trading for $5,000-6,000." Don't be surprised, because they're gonna get that heritage that's gonna come with time. As long as they keep putting out good models, great customer service, it will happen. So
yeah, and it's interesting because, like, in the watch world, obviously, even within luxury, you think of some of the big names. There are a lot that are quite young in relative terms to this centuries-old hobby,
right?
But that have made a name for themselves. I mean, obviously, people say that Rolex is not that old, and yeah, you compare it to a Vacheron or a Patek, like Rolex is like a fucking spring chicken. But even something like Hublot, they just celebrated 40 years, which in watch terms is peanuts. Right. And that started with just a simple idea for them saying, hey, what, let's put a slim quartz movement into a gold case, put some rubber on it, see if it sticks.
And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but Hublot basically was an homage of AP, right? Kind of. I mean, they pretty much look the same.
There's an interview with Jean-Claude Biver where he says, so the Big Bang, it looks kind of like the offshore,
right? Kind of.
No, and you know what Jean-Claude Biver said? He said, of course, why not? Yeah. And that reminded me of, I don't know if you ever watched the show Top Gear. It's a car show.
Yep.
I remember at that point, it was, I think it must have been a 2008, 2009 episode when the Jaguar XK of the time had come out.
Okay.
And a lot of criticism it got, granted it was designed by the same person, but it got a lot of criticism for looking too much like an Aston Martin DB9. Mm-hmm. And Jeremy Clarkson made a very good point. He said, too much like an Aston. That's like saying that a guy looks too much like Brad Pitt. Like, it's kind of like that. When you invite those comparisons, it kind of means you're doing something right because the shit looks good. And when Jean-Claude Biver then elaborated on the origin of the MDM Genève Hublot, it's not so much that they were paying homage or copying the AP. I mean, he pointed out plenty of differences between them. The fact that the AP is based around an octagon, the Hublot is completely circular. The AP doesn't have the wings. The Hublot does, albeit the Nautilus also has the wings. The Hublot was much skinnier, had a much more bare dial. It didn't even have indices on the original, I don't think. So there were a lot of differences, but what makes people think of them as similar is because they both took inspiration from the same thing, which is a porthole. So it's interesting in that sense that there are plenty of differences for it, but still, because they still look similar, ends up being called an homage. In the same way now with all the discussion about the Zenith Chronomaster with the Daytona. It's the same sort of thing. There's only so many ways you can make a sports chronograph with a ceramic bezel. Now, granted, I spoke on my own video that, they didn't do themselves any favors by making a bracelet that's looks very similar to the Oyster bracelet. And in my view, they have a perfectly good looking original bracelet in the Defy bracelet that could have used, but that's a whole other topic. But
I still would take the Zenith over the Daytona. Controversial comment there, but
I honestly, I would too, but that's also because the Daytona has never really driven me crazy.
I don't like Daytonas. It's okay.
But it doesn't drive me mad. Yeah. But that's a discussion for another time.
Oh, I'm sure a lot of people will get angry, especially Daytona owners, right? Like, how dare you? You're just a hater because you don't own one. Yeah, sure.
Like I've held one, like again, like they're cool, and I shot footage to review one, but then I was like, everyone knows this story, you know,
Yeah.
like, and that's one thing that interests me about the idea of microbrands, because you know me, I'm someone who I started out like obviously like most people, you start looking at the tried and true stuff, but the more I've been in this hobby, the more I want to just discover different stuff. I want to
Yeah.
discover new stuff.
Right.
The classics will always be there. Same thing like the Speedmaster. I love the Speedmaster, have a lot of respect for it, but would I ever want to get one? No, because there's always going to be one. It's always going to look broadly the same. And there's just so many other things you can get out there for a chronograph,
Yeah, no, I agree. Actually, Teddy Baldessar just dropped a video, I think yesterday or something. He's like building a watch with $25,000. So he goes to this jewelry store, and everything he picked was so boring. It's like, oh, great, JLC reverso. Oh, okay, Speedmaster. It's like, all right, I don't see any originality there. Like everything's so boring. Like I guess you become kind of jaded, right? Because you've been on YouTube for so long and you see review after review after review after review, and you're like, oh, not another Speedmaster review. Like I already seen 50 or 70 of them. Like, what could you possibly say about the Speedmaster that hasn't been said already? But when it's a new brand, a young brand, a micro brand, it's exciting because you're like, oh, let me check that out. That intrigues me. I haven't seen that before. So yeah, micro brands are definitely worth exploring for you, Fred, for any of your viewers watching this. Give them a shot. Give them a shot. You're not going to spend a lot of money, but I guarantee that when you wear that watch, it's kind of like you feel like, hey, if somebody compliments me on this or somebody actually knows what this is, and it's kind of like, if you know, and you're a part of the watch fam, because it's not every day that you see people, if I wear my Notice, right, and not a regular person out there is going to be like, oh, Notice, yeah, I know what that is. Never.
Yeah.
And if that ever happens, then I know that they know watches,
Yeah, exactly. It falls into that category of it's that watch that no one will notice for the wrong reasons, i.e. looking to maybe take it off you. But at the same time, when someone does notice it, that's probably someone you want to have a conversation with.
Yeah.
Because they need to know enough about watches to recognize that at a glance.
Yep.
It's like, all right, that's someone who you want to have a cup of coffee and see what other watch thoughts they have,
Yeah, for sure, man. Or even if I'll give you an example. So I met a guy that I think I forgot what I was wearing, but he complimented me on the watch. Never heard of the brand, but knew about watches. So once we started talking about specs and he saw the quality build, like he recognized like, oh wow, this is actually really good. Like, yeah, I may not know the name because I never heard of it, but it doesn't matter. Like the specs that they put on here, the original design, the bezel, the way that it turns is like, wow, if this was like a mainstream watch, it will be worth $1,500, $2,000.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I agree. And they can't charge that because they're a small brand, so.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's take a look at what people are saying in the chat. Let's see. We got Watch Collecting Strategies checking in. What's up, man? We've got Kevin S telling us that Bell & Ross is a young brand. Yeah, Bell & Ross is a pretty new brand. Actually, hopefully we'll be reviewing one of those.
Pretty well known though in the industry, I will say.
Yeah, they've been around for a while, and I think they're either owned by Chanel or or I know their cases are made by the same company that makes Chanel's watches. So I know they do have some sort of bigger company backing behind them.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about Bell & Ross is pretty unapologetic that they are a design company, first and foremost. They're not trying to be making in-house movements or anything like that. They don't have that sort of pretension. They don't make up a elaborate history for themselves. They take some inspiration from some vintage watches and emulate some vintage styles, but for the most part, they sort of know what they are,
Yeah.
And it's interesting seeing how different micro brands and how different brands in general sort of make that decision. Because I remember when we were on the podcast with the owner, one of the owners of Monte, and I asked him if, the plan was to make an in-house movement. And at that point, he was like, no, we're very focused. We want to just get our collection out and get our model line out, get watches in people's hands and do it right before we start, going crazy, making our own movement and stuff like that. Because obviously that's a big investment. But at the same time, you could tell that he just wanted to do things the right way, you know? And I think that's something really interesting is seeing the different sort of focuses and goals that some of these owners have, and the exposure you have to it. You know, who knows what, you know, the original founders of JLC, for example, wanted necessarily that watch to be. At the time, there were two individuals, you know, who were just partnering up.
Yeah, I agree, man. And I think this is just my personal opinion. Any company that's starting out and wants to just make money, and it's kind of like a money grab, maybe that gets translated to their designs, as opposed to the people that really do care about what the people have to say and take feedback from collectors and say, you know what, we really want to give these collectors what they want in terms of materials, in terms of original designs. And you could see it, right, with their models, with their 2.0s and 3.0s and what have you. So yeah, man, Bell and Ross, I'm looking forward to that video. I don't know much about him, a little bit, but
me neither. That's why I'm looking forward to it. That's one thing I like, is I like picking watches to review that I don't know anything about.
Yeah, man. So not to deviate too much here, but I don't know, you said Watch Collecting Strategies was in the chats. I'm not sure if he's still there, but AB is a guy that's always been very supportive since day one. He's been there for me, and if you don't know who he is or you haven't seen his channel, go check it out. Amazing stuff.
He makes some very good content.
Oh, he's amazing.
Very good quality videography.
Yeah, so I take a lot of inspiration from him as far as my videos go, and I've invested some more money in like equipment and stuff like that. Not that I'm trying to mimic what he's doing, because I don't want to copy the guy or copy anybody, but I take inspiration from him.
You don't want to be in homage?
I don't want to be in homage. I don't want to be in homage, but it's kind of hard when you look at AB's videos. Your jaw just kind of drops, and you're like, how did he do that? Like, that's so cinematic. And that's, for anybody that hasn't seen my channel, that's kind of what I'm into more, like the cinematic stuff. I don't know why, it just really speaks to me. So that's the kind of stuff that I like. And that's the cool thing about YouTube, right? That you create the content that you want to create, and hopefully people enjoy it. And if they don't, or if they don't watch, or you don't get enough subscribers, it's okay, because at the end of the day, you had fun and you created what you wanted to create, you know? So sorry for deviating from Microbrands.
No, of course.
Just wanted to throw it out there.
No, for sure. And shout out to AB. And yeah, he makes some great looking content. Like, the visuals are stunning. A lot of good perspectives as well. And then also he does highlight, I like that he also, you know, he highlights a few watches that are maybe a bit more off the beaten path. It's not just Rolex, you know? And I mean, granted, like, as YouTubers, like, at least those of us who can, obviously we have to start out with it because it gets views. You know, it happens with me a lot of the time. Like, I'm all the respect in the world for Rolex, but for me, they're very boring for me to review, because a lot of it is repeated or very similar history.
I agree.
I'm someone who gets fatigued when I feel I've learned as much as there is to know about certain models, especially with modern. Vintage is a whole other kettle of fish that I haven't touched yet. But but yeah, like, you know, I enjoy the learning experience and learning about a brand that I have no idea about a model I don't know about. And, you know, I always like when I see other channels as well doing the similar sort of thing, just exploring and showing you stuff that you wouldn't see in another channel. And that's something I like about with your channel as well, because with a lot of these micro brands, they don't have a lot of exposure. You know, that's why they're reaching out to YouTubers, so they can sort of get their story out there. And I think it's kind of cool that you can be a part of that as well.
Well, so I'll give you a story. So my channel, I've had the opportunity to maybe review more popular watches, but I haven't, just because I'm like, all right, so what can I say different that hasn't been said before? Like, I don't know. That's why I'm like, nah, let me focus more on unique pieces. And not only that, but because of the podcast and everything, I've been fortunate enough that a lot of these companies are starting to kind of reach out to me. I'll give you an example. So Aries Gold, right? A funny name. I know a lot of people are like, wait, from Entourage, like Aries Gold? I'm like, no, it's Aries Gold. Actually, they've been around since the 70s.
Oh, wow.
I never heard of them. I'm sure you never heard of them. P. Ross has never heard of them. All these people have never heard of them. So I went to go look at their designs, and they're very, you know, kind of loud, you know, very skeletonized and this and that. So us watch people were like, all right, that's a little too loud. But they recently came out what they call the Black Sea. I reviewed it, right? So it's a little on the larger size, like 43 millimeters. It does have an acrylic crystal, and it's selling for like $359. So I told the company, I said, hey, in my opinion, that's a little too much. And number one, it's too big. it's too much money for what the specs that you guys are giving. You do have an NH movement in there and a meteorite dial on this specific model, but they're like, you know what, we're just getting into this because we want to cater more to like the watch people, like the watch people, not just kind of the masses. So I know they're refining that model, and they're gonna keep producing things for more watch people. But it's funny how things change. I mean, not too long ago, big watches were the thing, and now we're going down to like smaller sizes, you know. And companies recognize that, you know, they like I said, they've been around since the 70s, but they see the writing on the wall, right? That they need to change their designs in order to cater to the new watch collectors, because I think the new watch collectors have a much different taste than the older watch collectors, I feel, you know. So they're evolving, so it's cool to be part of that ride, to say, hey, I remember reviewing their version 1 of the Black Sea, but now I have version 2.0, and let's see what they did right. And I'm excited to see what version 3.0 has to bring, you know. So it's always cool to be kind of early on in those designs,
Yeah,
from companies. So
yeah, and I think maybe seeing that journey and evolving, and in your case, you know, even being a part of it with giving your feedback.
yeah.
I'm just seeing a couple of people in the chat box. So Kevin S talking about typical watch YouTube video. I kind of like the Rolex killer. Yeah, I've done those. I've done those, but also like I think, and AB brings up a great point as well. You know, saying
Oh,
sometimes we have to
Sabi's
talk
still
about,
there?
yeah,
Hey,
talking about how
how's it going, buddy?
sometimes we have to talk about Rolex to get more people to see other things, and that's 100% true. A lot of the times, like it's, you know, at the end of the day, you can only get so far making stuff that people don't know about or people don't search for. If people don't know about it yet, they don't search for it. If they're not searching for it, they're not going
Yeah.
to watch it. You know, you kind of need to do something to draw people in. I know from my experience, a lot of times a Rolex video, yeah, like it's not my favorite thing to make because it's not always as interesting, though it is sometimes fun finding a different way to talk about something that everyone has spoken about. But sometimes you have to do it to get people in. You know, I see on my videos about, you know, about the Langes, about the Disnadan, about, you know, the obscure Crador that I discovered just while browsing for watches. Like I see when it says, you know, they came from XYZ Rolex video. It's like, all right, cool. If it got someone in from that, then it's doing its job, you know?
Interesting.
And so it does get people on board, and it's the same thing across. At the end of the day, this is how we market our channels. You know, you have to do something that everyone likes, and then you can get them to say, hey, so you like this watch that everyone likes, but, you know, have you checked out this?
So here's an interesting video that I just recently shot, and I'm kind of letting the cat out of the bag because I got a few reviews in front of it. But my jeweler here in California, so I just met him through a friend of mine, and he repaired one of my vintage. Well, he repaired a vintage watch that I bought from my friend, and the watch is running perfect, right? I'm like, hey, so who's your jeweler? He introduced me to the guy, so I go over there, and he's wearing a Rolex sub. I don't know the reference number. I wrote it down somewhere. I'm bad with Rolex reference numbers. I don't care, but it's a Rolex Mariner. It's not the maxi case. It's before the maxi case. And we were talking, and he's like, hey, so you're on YouTube? I'm like, yeah. He's like, can you promote my company? And I was like, I guess. I mean, I don't have a ton of subscribers, but he doesn't know how YouTube works. He's like, how about this? He's like, I'll service your watches or do anything you want and just do a video for my shop. I was like, deal, done. So I took him to my vintage watches to get service, like overhauled and everything. And took my camera, my lights, did a few things. But I did tell him, I said, hey, I have an idea. So you have that Rolex sub on your wrist. How about let me borrow it? Let me shoot some video of it. It's like, okay. So he gave it to me, gave me the bracelet because he had it on this ugly NATO. So he's like, yeah, here, you know, whatever. And I know this is going to sound dumb or probably weird, but it was my first time ever handling a Rolex. I've seen them before on people's wrists, but I had never played with one. So I was like a little kid in the candy store. I was like so excited. I was like, oh my God, this is my grail, like a Rolex Mariner, right? Just the traditional, you know, the black color bezel. And I had my Seiko SPB 143, and it occurred to me, I'm like, what if I shoot them both side by side and maybe do like a comparison video? Because the SPB 143 video that I did on my channel is the biggest viewed video on my channel. I'm up to almost 24,000 views on that. So clearly people are paying attention to that watch. So I'm like, what if I combine that with a Rolex Mariner, kind of comparing the two of them? So I don't know what the narrative is going to be. So that's why I haven't really looked into it, but I have a bunch of B-roll and pictures. But I can tell you this, Fred, I don't see the price difference in them. I'm like, does this Rolex, is it really worth $10,000 versus my $1,000 Seiko? Like, I just don't. I know this Rolex is better, obviously. I get it, but is it worth that much more? I don't know. To me, it just didn't, you know.
Yeah, I mean, like,
and I've loved
that's
Rolex.
yeah, I mean, like, it's a tough thing, like, talking about, like, is especially with Rolex because of where the hype is and how the
Yeah,
watches work.
right.
You know, like, that's why when I did my video on why the Hulk is so expensive, I wasn't there trying to say it is worth this much. You know, that's not for me to decide. The people who
Yeah,
decide how much a watch is worth is the people buying it. I
of
simply made
course.
that video
Right.
talking about how we got here, you know, and what contributes to it. And
Right. Great job, by the way. I love your
thank
videos.
you.
I'm like, how long does this guy spend doing all this research? Like, I just don't have that kind of time. Like, what the heck?
I just I like anytime I'm not working, I'm just reading up about watches, browsing around, looking for cool different watches. Pretty much, yeah. If I'm not working, I'm doing watches, and I'll usually find any excuse I can to sort of set work aside and do something watch related. But but yeah, like it's just because I enjoy it. I'm addicted to learning about watches, pretty much, and that's
That's
why I
great,
created the
man. And it
channel. Is
shows.
it's just my outlet for that.
It shows. It definitely shows. You're doing a good job, man.
Thank you. But yeah, like at the end of the day, it comes back to just, you know, finding a different way to approach these watches, because also these watches that are popular, you know, Rolex, Pateks, even like, you know, Seiko's. Like, for example, I imagine within the affordable segment, there's probably millions of videos about an SKX,
Oh yeah.
and it's probably like, you know, you on the one hand you kind of have to, because that's probably like something that could end up being sort of like a bread and butter video, but at the same time it's like, all right, but how do I approach this in a different way? How do I see this differently? But you kind of have to speak about it, not just because of the views, but because it's relevant to the industry. You know, these watches
Yeah.
are often the benchmarks for their segments, for their own merits, you know, so you kind of have to include them. But again, at the same time, for me at least, I get more enjoyment about the watches that I don't know as much about
Yeah,
and that
for
you don't
sure.
hear as much about.
Well, I guess it really depends at the end of the day. It's like, where are you trying to take your YouTube channel? Are you trying to
Yeah.
grow it, or is it more kind of like your self journey? Like for me, that's what it is, to be honest with you. Like I'm at, I don't know, 2,000 something subscribers, but at the end of the day, I really honestly I stopped caring. If my videos get views or don't get views, like I'm not doing this for a living. I have my job, you know, so I'm doing it for fun, just because I like shooting product and learning more about my camera skills and stuff like that, because I implement that into my personal life. You know, we could go somewhere with my family and I implement some of the things that I learned to shooting photography and doing different things, and I get enjoyment out of it, to be honest with you. And not only that, but also reviewing the watch, having it in hand, like I get joy out of that. It's cool when you get the recognition from your peers and you get views and all that. I don't want anybody to take that the wrong way. I really do enjoy it, and it's kind of like, it's great feedback, but I am not just concerned about the numbers and the statistics and all that. I was at first, but now it's just like I care more about the community, you know, and reaching out. And the cool thing about this YouTube thing is the people in it, you know, and everybody's become almost like family, you know. And like you, Fred, I mean, we've known each other for a while. We became really good friends, and this is what it's all about, man. Even when we stop doing this YouTube thing, we're still gonna be friends, you know. So
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think there's so much more to the hobby than just the watches themselves.
it's not even
Like,
about the watches, man.
it
It's
yeah,
about the
exactly.
community.
Like anything, you know, I think like anything, you know, it's the conduit to those other things. It's, you know, it's the
Correct.
conduit to the knowledge, to the interactions, to the community.
Yeah.
and and the same thing also, like, you know, to like just the skills you learn while you're YouTubing away. You know,
Yeah.
it's that whole it's more than just, you know, get a watch, take a few pictures of it and call it a day,
No.
and and just watch the numbers grow, you know. But yeah, I think, and obviously everyone has their different approach and their own little spin on it as well. And but yeah, I mean, like, it's at the end of the day, it's for fun. For me, the day that this feels like work is probably the day I'm like, all right, fuck this, I'm done with this.
Same here, man. Like honestly, and it's gotten to that point really where I'm like so busy and this and that, and then my wife looks at me and she's like, "Wow, this is almost like your job." And she's right. I'm like, "Yeah, I started this as a hobby. I don't want this to turn into a job." And it really does feel like it, but I'm so passionate about it still that even though it's kind of like a job, I'm so passionate about it. But yeah, you're right. The minute that it feels like this is overwhelming and I'm just not passionate about it, it's the minute that I'm probably gonna just kind of hang it up, you know?
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's take a look at who else is in the box while we're just coming up to that 1 hour, mark. All right, so we've got watch collecting strategy. AB was talking about how he's fine with some people being mad about calling something a sub killer, for example, because he introduced people to a brand that they might not have heard of. And it's true, Rolex is a great way to just segue or use a reference point to show, okay, where does this watch sit in the gigantic ecosystem that is watches, and it's a way to draw in the eyeballs, you know, it's a way to get them interested. Then we've got Kevin S saying he loves the GOCQ. He'd take that over a sub any day. Me too. Give me the one with the big date, please. And Mr. B is in here.
Oh, Mr. B. What's up, man?
Hi guys, sorry I'm late. Yeah,
just a little late, just an hour late. It's okay.
Sehr spät, sehr spät. But yeah, good to see you in here, man. Kevin S saying he gets just as much enjoyment wearing his SPB 149 as he does a Rolex. Each has a place in the collection. That's very true. You know, I think not all watches are equal. Not all watches are the same in the sense that we get them for different purposes. We get them for different appeals. It's not even just about purpose. At the end of the day, this is a hobby that is largely unnecessary, but we still come up with ideas in our head of, no, you know what, I need this watch for this purpose.
Yeah,
or I just like it for that, you know?
Yeah, but honestly, and in my opinion, get a watch that, and this is going to sound cliche, but get a watch that impresses you. Don't get a watch to impress others, because you're collecting, that's a wrong collecting strategy, you know? In my opinion, you know, and the people that get watches to impress others and be flexing and all that is just, you could tell those kind of people, you know, you don't want to be associated with those people.
You know what, they get their enjoyment out of their watch for their own reason, for their own way, you know.
Good for them.
if they feel good about it, just the nature of it being on their wrist, that people see it, you know what, whatever floats their boat, whatever finds their lost remote. But we actually have a few questions coming in right at the end, which is good. So Miguel, I don't know how you're doing for time. You got time for a few more questions?
Absolutely, man. All the time in the world for you, buddy.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. All right. So we've got, first one from Kevin S. What Chronos have you been interested in these days? I can talk on this for a while. Miguel, have there been any Chronos that have been on your radar lately?
Oh man, I mean the only one that comes to mind, because I really respect, is the 321, right? The Omega 321.
That way.
And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, something that I really want to pick up is a watch with a seagull movement, the ST19. That's a beautiful movement, man. For the price that they're charging, it's incredible, right? So it was from a Venus. I don't know if you know the story, but basically the Chinese back in the days bought the equipment from Switzerland, from Venus, and basically modified it a little bit and started making watches for their own. I believe it was the Air Force, well, it was military. And yeah, man, I mean, the seagull movements are kind of everywhere now, and there's a lot of Microbrands. Laurier, that's another Microbrand that I forgot to mention. They're doing some really good stuff, very unique designs, and they have that movement featured in their watches. So yeah, man, that those are the two that I will love to check out, you know. What about you? I'm sure high-end, expensive stuff.
Man, I've had Chronos on my mind for a while. You know, I've been wanting to for one thing, I want to get a watch this year, and I'm one of those people who will research like crazy before I actually make a decision.
Right,
and
that's good.
And I originally wanted to get a GMT to replace this, because I don't really like it that much, because it looks too much like a Rolex. I'm kind of, I've got homage fatigue, I guess, if that's a thing.
Yeah.
But then I started looking at Chronos, because also I missed having a chrono. You know, I sold my Black Bay chrono, which I really loved, but
it was too thick.
Things. It was too thick, and you know, the screw down pushers, man, I didn't really use the chrono. It just wasn't the chrono for me. Great watch though, and very, very good chronograph feel with the Breitling B01 movement. But yeah, so I've been looking at a bunch of Chronos, and like every week I put up just another watch that's just come on to that's on my mind, because also I'll fixate on a watch for like a week, 2 weeks, and then be like, all right, done. On to the next one. This is why I take my time to buy, because otherwise I would be buying, selling, and losing money all the way along.
That makes sense.
But one watch that keeps coming back to me is the Zenith El Primero hand wound from the late 90s, early 2000s. And I just like it because it's like, what better way, than to get a watch that claims to be the first automatic chronograph? You get a manual version of it.
They're probably not. It was Seiko, but
I won't litigate who was actually first, but I just love the idea of, I'm going to get an El Primero that isn't even automatic, because what could be more different and out there than that,
I mean, Speedmaster.
No, but the thing is, Speedmaster was never meant to be, an automatic. That's the thing, is I like the idea that, like, this whole story behind the El Primero is that it's purportedly the first automatic. Obviously, definitely the first integrated automatic, at least.
Yeah.
And the first high beat automatic chronograph.
Right.
What better way to subvert the cliche than just to get a manual one? And it looks really cool as well. Like, it's got these, I think they're like supposed to be called military style numerals. I don't know the exact wording, but like the similar numerals to what you'll find on a Vacheron Overseas Gen 1 chronograph, on a Blancpain Le Mans. And those are two watches I love as well. But
that'd be awesome, man. Yeah. Hopefully you get it.
Yeah, that's one that keeps coming back to me. So I'm guessing, and also it's only like 10 millimeters thick. So I know I won't be having the problem that I had with the Tudor.
What about cost? Is it expensive?
So the ones that I've seen, it's about $2,500 to $3,500 US. It's just a case of finding the right example. I want to get one that has both box and papers, just because I'm one of those box and paper sorts of people. I like it being, all full and complete. There are some that are without. There's some that come on straps. Obviously, if I do, I want to get it on the bracelet. So it's just a case of finding the right one. And also, right now I live in India, and import taxes are big. So I don't really want to pay, 1.5 times for my watch just because of taxation. So I want to wait until like COVID goes down, I can travel again, and then probably get it once I'm in a way that I can buy it without having to pay a ton of import taxes, like buy it in Europe or something like that. Let's see. There were a couple other questions I saw coming in. AB is asking me for my favorite independent, and Miguel for his favorite microbrand. Miguel, let's go with you. You have to name a favorite microbrand.
Man, that's a good one. I would say Notice, man, just because I'm friends with Wes, and we become, I don't want to say good friends, but we know each other, and I respect what they're doing. I respect the quality. I really like just everything they stand for. So I would just say Notice.
Yeah. All right.
What about you, buddy?
For my favorite independent, if I'm honest, independence is another area that I haven't explored probably as much as I should. Much like vintage, it's a whole other world, but definitely something I want to look in. But one independent that I really, really like is Moser. I love just the detailing on their cases. Like, even on the Pioneer, like, they have like these hollowed out lugs.
Yep.
And I'm normally not someone who's crazy about minimalism, but just the way they pull it off, and with the fume dials as well, give me a Pioneer centiseconds in mad red, and I will just be very, very happy.
You know what I like about Moser? That they don't take themselves seriously. They mock the Swiss counterparts. Obviously, they put out commercials and whatnot. And with that Apple Watch, man, I mean, it's crazy, right? And the new one they just came out with.
Yeah, that was so cool. Like, I love how they have the fucking load screen, which is like the one thing you hate seeing on anything like that's digital, is seeing a load screen, and they managed to find an analog mechanical way of representing that.
It's so cool.
I think that is so cool. And you know what? It's publicity stunt. I don't care if they get popular off that. If they get attention from that, please do, because it's fun. Yeah,
man.
So many times brands just take themselves too fucking seriously.
Yeah,
it's nice knowing that they're able to make seriously good watches and having a good time. You imagine that the people working behind that were enjoying making it, were enjoying developing it, and the people who sell them probably enjoy, like working in the Moser boutiques or in Moser ADs. Like, I just love it. I love that philosophy, and that's a way of doing something different within a segment that's, that's so saturated with serious watches. And the thing is, that was a choice that was relatively recent, because if you look just a few years, well, not a few years, maybe like 15, 20 years ago, like, I've got some old watch catalogs, from like 2007, 2009, and you see Mosers, and they look very
traditional.
Yeah, they look like a Patek dress watch. So at some point they had that shift, and that's something I love, is when you see a brand actually shift gears, especially in an industry that's known for holding on to tradition for so long.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
Yeah, definitely Moser would be probably my favorite independent, the one I know the most about. If I'm honest, I need to look more into independents. I just haven't done it yet. But one channel that does independents really well, Swiss Watch Gang. They feature a lot of cool independents and also very good videography.
For sure.
Let's see. Kevin S likes the Christopher Ward C65 chronograph.
Beautiful.
And also talking about the El Segundo. Listen, I think when it comes to the automatic chronographs that came out in 1969, it is like the Oscars. You have to be very specific. You know, Zenith won the award for first automatic chronograph integrated with a high beat and a column wheel in a foreign language. You know, like they won that specific category. And the same thing, you know, with the Caliber 11, they will be there saying, "Yep, but we were the first ones with a micro rotor, but it was a module." And, you know, being Tag Heuer, we decided to be cool and put the chronograph pushers on opposing sides of the crown, just to let you know that this is something special. And then, of course, Seiko was the best silent chronograph that no one heard about, but that probably was the actual one that was actually first. But no one will ever really know because they were too quiet about the announcement of it, you know.
Yeah.
but
I get it.
That's the fun thing, you know. Like I would love to be in a room with, you know, someone who has like an original Caliber 11, an original upper Mero, and a original, I forget what the caliber number was for the Seiko, but an original 1969 Seiko chronograph, and just watch them bicker. I would just love that. Let's see. Abby recently shot a commercial for the new Swiss Alp, and he was confused the whole time shooting the watch. Whoa. What was confusing, apart from the fact that it's, well, I guess, I probably would be confused. I'd just be looking, is there an error on the watch?
AB's killing it, by the way. Now he's doing commercials for watch companies. Crap.
Yeah, goals. I mean, the videography is dope. Like, you can't deny it.
Yeah,
well earned, man. Well earned. Looking forward to seeing how that commercial turns out. And then the bald watch collector. A recent brand caught my eye is Batavi. Definitely want to get one of their GMTs. Have you heard of that brand? Batavi?
I think I have now. The bald watch collector. So Troy, I'm not sure if that's an homage, because I think I've seen them, but I'm not sure if they're an homage kind of thing. But I think I've seen them on Instagram. Not 100% sure, but
all right, I'll take your word for it because I don't know that. Cool. Well, we have now just surpassed the 1 hour mark, so we should probably wrap things up. Miguel, what's coming soon on your channel, man? What can people look out for? What's coming soon on your channel and on the podcast? We haven't said it enough, but Miguel does host a podcast every week. He gets the owners of these independents on. He talks to people within the industry as much as, you know, just other watch collectors, other watch YouTubers. He's publishing them on YouTube now, so you can see them in full zoom. Him and Pete Ross from Ross Wristwatch Love, y'all do some dope stuff, and I'm on there from time to time as well. Which
for sure, man. So what do we have coming up? We have tomorrow the interview or podcast collaboration we did with Mark from Long Island Watch is airing tomorrow, and then the video's airing on Tuesday. Every Tuesday I air something, and then tomorrow we have Average Joe Watch Reviews. I don't know if you guys heard of him, but he's getting pretty popular on YouTube. He does something. We're going to collaborate with him tomorrow. I know in the works, and I haven't locked them down, but I'm in talks with Christian from Theo and Harris. Oh, nice. I've known the guy for quite a while, and I'm like, hey man, come on the podcast. He's like, yeah, anytime, just let me know. We got to figure something out. So I need to figure out what time and what day works for him. So we got him. As far as videos, man, some review for some straps. I need to review another watch for that company for the Aries Gold. They call it El Toro, the bull. So they send that watch in for review. They gave it to me, you know, for free to keep. So I got that. So I want to shoot that. That SPB versus the Rolex, I got that in the works as well. Seiko 5 that I shot, SNKL 41J1. I can't remember. I can't really remember that. I barely remember my own social security, but I remember that reference because That was a watch that was beautiful. My wife actually loved it. It was a Seiko 5 white dial, and I actually had to return it to Joma shop because I was not keeping time within the power reserve. But before I sent it back, I shot a bunch of B-roll because it's a beautiful watch. That's in the works. I shot B-roll and video for 2 Formex watches, a chronograph and a pilot's watch. I gave them back. I returned the Formex watches, but I have all that lined up that has just been sitting there, and I need to translate it to my Spanish for my Spanish video as well. And that's a ton of work. So
busy, man.
I am yeah.
Well, man, thank you so much for joining me, man. I know we've been needing to do this for a minute.
Thanks for the invite.
Man, again, one of the things, bringing it back to one of the best things about being on YouTube is the people you get to know. And, I think it's fucking sick that we first linked up, a year and a half ago.
Right.
Tiny ass channels. I think I was on episode 3, 4 of the podcast. And it's crazy seeing how your channel has grown, how the podcast has grown, some of the people you've been able to talk to. So I really want to congratulate you for that, man. I think it's
thanks, man. And I want to thank you too. And before I move on, AB Watch Collecting Strategies, he needs to be on the podcast. We talked about it. We haven't chatted about it, but AB, let me know what day time works for you. You have my email, or I'll email you. Definitely want to have you on. But yeah, Fred, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Not just coming on the podcast, you were a part of the podcast for a few episodes, but then of course you got busy, you got your own things, and you kind of said, you know what, I will always be a part of this podcast, but I can't do it on a weekly basis. And that's kind of the way you've been doing it, right? Because you come on whenever we have time or whatever. But the cool thing, like I said, is the friendship is not just a friendship, it's almost like becoming family. And as the years progress and our success keeps growing, it's cool to kind of look back and say we started small and we still got to remain humble. We can never let this whatever success or whatever you want to call it get to our heads, because once it does, you're screwed. You need to stay humble, you need to stay grounded, and always be a part of the community. So
yeah, for sure. And that's, again, also another thing that's great. The great thing is just knowing that, like, whenever you guys need me, I can be on, and knowing at the same time that, if I, like, there have been times where like when we did our Christmas episode, it's cool that we already have like that little tradition. It's like, all right, I said, hey man, let's do a Christmas thing again. We did it last year. It's like you have those little traditions building, and I think that's also part of the fun of it. Like you said, it's like family. You got family that comes over for Christmas dinner, and now you're stuck with me coming on your podcast.
Why, Fred? Why? Hey, and by the way, and before I forget, I don't know if Mr. B's still on, but we've been talking about having him on the podcast, and it just has not happened. I don't know why. Maybe because of the time difference, because he's in Germany. But definitely want to have him on, Mr. B, Konstantin. I'm probably butchering your name, but I'm sorry.
All right, man. Well, thank you also, of course, to everyone who watched this, everyone who's watching this after it goes live, everyone who asked questions in the chat. At the end of the day, doing a live show is much more fun when you have questions going on, because it can go off the rails. It can go in different directions.
It could be scary, though.
It can be scary, and I seem to be plagued with technical difficulties, but whatever. This was fun.
It is what it is.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for participating, everyone for watching. Thank you, Miguel, for joining in. Thank you, AB, Mr. B, Costas P. I saw you come in late at the end of the thing. The Bald Watch Collector, Kevin S. I'm probably leaving a few people out, but everyone who was in and out throughout this, thank you so much, and we'll catch you on the next one. See you later, Miguel.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
All right, bye.